Hey kiddos, Mr. Arnold, we're going to talk about water sustainability, and basically, so we know that we're having some issues with how much water we have and how quickly it's going away. And so what can we do then to sustain our water sources? So I'd like to start off with a little bit of a case study, and the Colorado River, I think, is a great example of a water system that's rapidly disappearing, and so we're having some problems sustaining the water flow here. And so there are 5 issues that are leading to this problem with sustainability for the Colorado River. So the first one is that the basin that feeds into it is one of the driest places in North America. So the Colorado River, basically its watershed, okay, that feeds into the Colorado River is in the southwest. And so the southwest of the United States does not get a lot of water. And so therefore it's not get a lot of input into it. That lack of input is going to lead to it having a fairly low flow in the first place. Okay, it's not a particularly raging river at most parts. Now there are parts of it that are, big rapids and that are pretty vital for recreation, but overall it's not a giant rate of water flow. The third thing is that there are legal pacts, and these legal agreements between the United States and Mexico were made back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And so when they originally made these allocations, it was actually for more than we can handle for the humans that we have now. Now, at that time, it might have been okay, but there are millions and millions of more people that rely on this river now. And the agreements never actually did anything for wildlife or for the ecosystems at all. They didn't take that water need into account. It was just for humans at that time frame. Okay, and so it's overdrawn, essentially. The river actually doesn't reach the Gulf of California right now because of the reduced water flow. If you guys remember, we watched a little video clip that talked about this, that it's essentially just a dry, almost desert land there where the Colorado River normally would have gone out. And the fifth point is that it gets a lot of pollutants from the cities around it, from the farms, from the feedlots that are around it, from all the industries that pull water from it. There's just not much left. And so this is why, this is sort of our case point for why we need to worry about sustaining our water flows. Okay, so just a few quick hits, and you can copy these down or take a snapshot as you feel as you want to, but this is just an example of some other water shortages. There are 30 countries in the world right now that are under really extreme stress from water shortages that just don't have enough water for the people that they currently have. That doesn't include the people that they're going to have in the future. They don't have enough water now. China back in 2006 reported that 600 of its major cities did not have enough water. There are 2 or more countries, that should be 2 or more. Hold on, I'll change that real quick. I know it's a great video. There are 2 or more countries right now that have to share water supplies, okay? That there are 263 major water basins, major watersheds, and they have to share water. And only 158 of them right now have agreements for that water. So that leaves, obviously, like 85 of them that there's no agreement. And so, I mean, that's an obvious source of conflict that isn't going to be sustainable in the future. Right now, there's 1.2 billion people that don't have access to clean water. It's actually probably higher than that now. The stat was probably from a couple of years ago, and so there's a lot more now. That's, I mean, basically a fifth of the people on the planet. And then I find this fact interesting, and so I listed a bunch of sort of negative things there, and so I'm going to put one sort of positive thing at the bottom here. Actually, right now, the United States, our water use has been stable. For the 30-year frame between 1975 and 2005, when the report that I pulled this from was put out, our water use has actually been stable because we've increased our efficiency. We've increased our efficiency of irrigation. We've decreased the amount that we're wasting. And so I sort of put that in there to say sustainability is possible. Sometimes you hear that it's not possible, but we can do this if we just look at a few things. So a few things that we want to look at right away to how can we sustain this is right now about 2/3 of the water that we use is lost. Okay, it's evaporated away, it leaks out, it's diverted in some way that isn't going to be useful. So what that means is that there's 66% or 67% that we're not using efficiently right now. Okay, and if we could cut that amount out, we would basically use about 1/3 of the water that we're using right now. That would be sustainable. Even if our population increased, it would be sustainable. For the United States, about half of our water that we pull out is wasted. Okay, so what that means is that in the United States, we're doing better than the 2/3 for the world. we're a half instead of 2/3. But that obviously leaves a lot of room for improvement, okay? And so that's sort of our last point on this part, is that it's feasible that we could get our waste down to about 15%. I mean, you're never going to eliminate all the waste, but if we just lowered it down to 15%, then our sustainability problems would be gone. We would be able to sustain not only our current water needs, but our water needs for the future as well. So what are the causes of water waste? Well, two of them, and two of them are sort of, I want to say, values issues, and we'll talk about that in a second. The third one, just jump down to this. We're using old methods of agriculture. Look at that typo, I'm going to fix it right now. Old methods of agriculture, flood and furrow irrigation, are extremely wasteful. So furrow irrigation is like this, where there's basically furrows. These are these long, basically holes dug out, long canals dug out, and they're filled with water. That's furrow irrigation. Flood irrigation, a little hard to see here, but this is a rice paddy. And rice paddies, basically what they do is they completely cover them over. They flood them. They do this with cranberry bogs too. They flood them, and obviously that's a pretty inefficient way to irrigate, because obviously it works well for rice. It's sort of the normal way to do it for rice, but all of that water then gets drained off and it isn't being used very efficiently. Obviously it's going to evaporate pretty quickly while it's flooding the field. Okay, so let me jump back to the first two areas here. Cause of water waste. And you guys should have seen this from the activities that we've been doing in class. It doesn't cost us very much to use water, okay? You could just about leave a hose on all month and your water bill would be higher, but it wouldn't be ridiculous, okay? Water is cheap for us. I want to say that when we calculated, it was about, what, 0.19 cents a gallon? I think that might even actually be high. So it doesn't cost a lot for us to use it. And a big reason that water doesn't cost us a lot to use in the United States is because the government subsidizes the use of water, so that people that are doing farms and stuff, that are farming, that they don't pay as much for their water. So here's the deal. I mean, we know this, just general human nature. If something's cheap, then there's no reason to conserve it. Like, why do we not conserve paper plates? Because they're cheap. You go to the store and you buy a big pack of them and they're not that expensive. And so we don't bother to conserve them. The second thing is that there's lack of subsidies for improving the efficiency. So the government does sort of this weird thing that actually makes us work in the area of wasting water instead of conserving it, because the government subsidizes us and makes it cheap. And at the same time, it doesn't subsidize any sort of technological increases that are going to help to improve the efficiency. Okay, so those two things work counter. Real quick, one of the biggest ways, if we talked about the irrigation there, okay, old methods of irrigation. So let's talk about some new methods of irrigation that are much more efficient and would waste a lot less water. So the first one, you've probably seen these around. These are called LEPA irrigators. And basically they go around in a circle. Okay, they're got a center radius, and this little apparatus here, I pointed at the computer, like you can see that. This little apparatus here, the irrigating apparatus, actually just spins around in a circle, and that's where you see those circular patterns. But it's what's called a LEPA because it's very low energy and it's very precision, and it's not forcing the water out at a very high rate. It's actually coming out at a pretty low rate, and so it doesn't waste nearly as much water. Up here we can see gravity flow irrigation, and again, it requires valves in there that are not going to just let it flow out. But there are valves in there according to how much pressure is there, and it basically allows only small amounts out. And so this reduces the waste by about 60 to 80%. And then two that I think are really kind of cool technological fixes for wasting so much water, and these were as well, but I really like these two. Hydroponic, first off. Hydroponic basically means that all that's being used to grow this is water, that there's no soil involved at all. Now, you can say, how can this be large scale? But there are large scale hydroponic areas that do pretty big farms, not large scale worldwide, but for an area. And it's pretty cool because basically the only water that gets used is the water that the plant actually needs, and all the rest of it gets recycled. Okay, the nutrients and everything are in the water, all the stuff that the plant needs, the nitrogens and all that, already in the water, but they get recycled, so it's really efficient. The fourth one here is drip irrigation. Drip irrigation is really efficient because you got this hose running through here, and it's basically just got little tiny holes in it, and so it's just dripping little bits out at a time, and it really helps to that water doesn't get evaporated because you're not just sprinkling it out or pouring it on there. There's not a furrow full of water. Just little bits of water are going out. It's being immediately absorbed into the soil and into the plants. Up to 95% more efficient than our normal methods. Okay? So how can we cut our water waste? We can line the canals also. So like if we are doing furrow irrigation, we can line the canals. We could irrigate at night. I know when I grew up in Florida, we were having some water restrictions. Basically, they told people you can water your lawns, you can sprinkle your lawns, which I think is ridiculous anyway. But you can do that, but only at night. Therefore, the water isn't going to get evaporated as quickly. You can monitor the moisture levels. There are technological fixes. We can put a monitor in there that says, hey, the soil's already moist. There's no need to put more water on there. Polyculture means to grow different crops together, and we're going to dive into this next semester when we actually start to grow some of this stuff. We're going to do what's called polyculture. We're going to grow different crops together because they have different moisture levels, and it's going to help out the soil. Grow appropriate crops, and what I mean by that is grow crops that are appropriate for that area, okay? If it doesn't make any sense to grow that type of grass in that area, don't grow it. It's one of the things I actually like about Tennessee is that we don't generally water our lawns very much up here. We just let the grass that grows there. You want to grow crops that are appropriate for that area. Rainwater harvesting, if you got rain barrels off of buildings, you could do that at home also, and that's going to help to ease your water amount. You're not going to have to water the soil around because you're collecting some that you can then use to water the soil instead of just running it from your sprinkler system. We don't think about this one a lot, but more canopy cover. What that means is that if there are trees sort of blocking it out and shading the area at certain points of the day, it lowers the evaporation level, and so therefore you're not going to waste as much water. Mulching fields also helps. Like, why do we mulch? Well, partially we mulch because it looks nice, but the initial impetus that mulching sort of started was that it absorbs moisture and helps to hold moisture in, and so it doesn't evaporate out as quickly. That also can be used for crops. And now obviously say, well, if we're going to mulch an enormous area, that's a lot. And it is, but if you're saving a lot of water by doing that, then perhaps in the cost-benefit analysis, that comes out pretty well. Okay, in part 2 of this video, we're going to talk about a lot more ways that we can cut water waste as well.